With any assignment you undertake, whether it be for school or for a client, the place to start is always with your instructions. For our Campus Votes ad series, our instructions are coming in the form of a creative brief from an imaginary client. So in order to review, just simply go through the content in the creative brief, and that should give you some clues as to what you're going to want to design. In our case, what we're going to be doing is creating ads that are designed to get college students to register to vote and to vote. Our target audience, of course, then is college students. Specifically, our college students are undergraduates at the University of South Florida. There's an age range specified, and there's also some perception and tone listed in your creative brief. So you want to be designing an ad that's not controversial or headbutting like so many of the political ads are, but something that's a little bit more fun and encourages students to come forth and vote, setting out some of the things that are positive about voting, and the ease at which. The most important message in this particular case is that registering to vote is actually easy. It's for everyone, and the results can impact your life for years to come. You can also scan through your creative brief for other specific information that you might need to use. In this case, there is a required logo that must be used, and there are required colors that must be used. So with that information in hand, the next thing to do would be to take that information and brainstorm ideas on how you might get those messages and that information across. If you read White Space is Not Your Enemy, Chapter 2, there was a whole series on brainstorming. I did a little thinking based on this, and I came up with the idea that I wanted to do a tagline that is physics or some other topic is very hard, but voting is easy. So with that in mind, I then set out to do some searching for some images that I thought would go along with that idea, and also some that were going to meet the needs of the specific brief. The brief does mention that there needs to be some image of students, there needs to be some image of voting-related imagery. So I got on a couple of free sites. I highly recommend pixabay.com, pexels.com, and unsplash.com for free stock photography that you can use. I ended up choosing as a main image this one, again, of student, frustrated with something that is difficult. I also grabbed a couple of images that are American flag, not being entirely sure which one I would want to use, but I grabbed a few. It's often a good idea to grab several images because you never quite know what's going to work with your design. And the other thing that I was able to get a hold of was the actual logos. The logos have been provided in several formats, depending on what you need. Because our project is going to start with a print design, what we need is a vector version of the logo. And in this case, my vector version is an Adobe Illustrator file. It ends in .ai. Or sometimes they are EPS files and end in .eps. So for print, that's what you're going to be looking for. Once you've kind of assembled all the assets that you think you might use, your next step is to create some sort of working sketch. I also found the sketching options in discussion in Chapter 2 of White Space is Not Your Enemy. I did this very quick sketch knowing that I had this photo that I would like to use to fill the whole space. And because it had some lovely negative space in it, pull it back up again, positive space, negative space up here, the negative space becomes a great place for me to put my chosen tagline. This photo, I also liked it because it has a lot of movement. It has a very vertical direction. We kind of have a triangle that ends up kind of pointing up towards the negative space, so it'll draw our attention to the headline. It also has some color going on, and it has some nice depth and texture because of the things in the background. So those are all compositional elements that are, again, discussions from White Space is Not Your Enemy, which was part of your reading for this assignment. So, take those things into account when you're choosing your images and then making the sketch as to how you're going to make use of the compositional elements within your actual layout. So now that we have sketch and we have assets, the next thing that you want to do is you want to set up your actual document. And if you, in your creative brief, were given dimensions, you'll want to use those. In this case, our creative brief didn't include them, but they are in your assignment file on Canvas. And our print ad, which is what we're going to start with, is 4.5 inches or 4 inches by 5.5. So to create a new document, we're working in Photoshop today. Launch Photoshop, and you'll either get a dialog box at the outset that asks you what you want to create, and you can create from here, or from here I'm going to choose File menu and Create New. And when I get to this dialog box, I'm going to go over here to the right side column. I'm going to choose 4 inches. I'm going to choose inches first as opposed to pixels, which you might use for a digital ad. Width of 4, height of 5.5. And in this case, I want my resolution to be high resolution, which generally speaking is 300 pixels per inch. If you were doing an ad for social media, you would probably want pixels per inch, but you would probably want more like 72. But because we're doing print, we're going to start with 300. Usually for print, the next tab down is color mode. In your final output, you'll want this to be CMYK, as that is printing color space. We're going to talk about that in a future class. But while you are still working and while you're still editing, it's good to leave things in RGB mode because a lot of the tools are only going to be available to you in RGB mode. You get an option for background contents. If you were creating something that had a cutout background, you might choose transparent. For my purposes today, I am just going to stick with white. And once I've got all my settings in place, I'm going to choose Create. So here is our Photoshop Workspace, just a quick mini tour of it. It's very similar to the other products in the Adobe Creative Suite. You have a contextual control panel up at the very top, so whatever tool you happen to be working with, and this on the far left is your toolbox, these options will change. You also have a series of palettes. Mine are over here docked on the right side. Any palette that you can't find here, you can usually find up under the window menu. And the palettes will give you options for the various tools. For example, you can see the character palette over here. One thing that I do want to do before we get too far afield is I want to set up some other things that are going to be required for print ads. Especially if a print ad is going to be a full page, you might actually want to run your image all the way to the edge of the page, or technically actually beyond it. So in case it crops, you have what they call a bleed. We're going to do, this is a smaller ad, so it's going to be in an interior section. But the other thing that we do need to consider is sometimes we need what they call a live area. Again, if they're doing any trimming or they're doing anything, they usually specify that any content that needs to be seen needs to be inset within a certain amount. And I do not believe that the specifications for this ad had those, but if we were to create those, say that the live area was a 1/2 inch all the way around, what I would do is I would take the selection tool, which is always the top, this is kind of the 4 cardinal directions tool in the top of the tool box. And I'm actually going to take that, and you can see that there's a set of rulers here at the top and on the side. If you don't see them, you can always go to View, the View menu at the very top, and choose to make rulers active. You can use the rulers to click and drag yourself guidelines. I am going to go up to the top, and I said, let's give this a 1/2 inch all around live area. I'm going to grab the actual ruler itself with the select tool. I'm going to click and drag down into my document window. And from the right side or the left side ruler, if I go down a 1/2 inch and drop myself a guideline, it stays put. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, a 1/2 inch up from the bottom, which puts me right about there. If you want to be very, very precise, you can see that there's an actual number next to the cursor. And then I'm going to go from the left side, 1/2 inch in, and I'm going to drop one from the right side, 1/2 inch in. Now that sets you up with your boundaries, your live area. And from this point, we would be ready to start comparing to our sketch and bringing in our assets.